This is Nick Williams with Temple of Geek, and today we are reviewing the Acolyte Episode 5 titled Night. This review will contain spoilers, so make sure you've watched the episode before continuing. So by now you've seen Episode 4, and the Jedi are confronted by the Master. The last we saw of them, he did a big force push, and everybody was blown back. When we start this episode, we find Osha regaining consciousness. When she returns, she finds a lightsaber battle going on between the Master and the Jedi. We already see one Jedi dead on the ground, but as the battle continues, we see more and more Jedi dying by the Master's hand. Or I should say, the Master's lightsaber. Before Osha gets herself in real danger, Sol shows up and tells Yord to take her back to the ship. So Yord and Osha head back to the ship with their tracker Basil leading the way, while Sol stays and confronts the Master. So at this point, most of the Jedi are gone, so it is now Sol and the Master head to head. The Master is still mysterious and wearing a mask. But Sol says he does recognize the Master's presence in the Force. While all of this is going on, Mae is still back in Kelnaka's hut. She takes his lightsaber and makes her way outside, but before she could get very far, Jeckie confronts her. So now you have a battle between Mae and Jeckie and Sol and the Master. Jeckie is eventually able to subdue Mae and get her in restraints. And that's when she goes to help her master Sol. As Yord and Osha are making their way back to the ship, Osha has the feeling that she should return. That the Master is going to kill everyone. They end up in the same area where the huge flying insects were that were attracted to light. Osha is eventually able to convince Yord to head back, and she uses a light to attract the insects to follow them. Back to the lightsaber battle, Jeckie and the Master are eventually going head to head. During this battle, Mae starts to run away, and the Master keeps going after Mae. The Master being betrayed and wanting to kill Mae. But while this is all going on, both Jeckie and Sol are going back and forth with the Master. And unfortunately, the Master kills Jeckie. The Master catches up to Mae again, and before he can kill her, Sol returns. As the Master and Sol are fighting, Sol is able to break the helmet off the head, revealing Chimere, who we suspected this entire time had something more to his story. And Chimere knows that Sol is hiding something from his past, and that past involves Osha and Mae. The Master is able to catch back up to Mae and uses her as a hostage. This is when one of the most important lines of the episode happens. Sol asks the Master who he is, or what he is. Chimere says something to the effect of, "You Jedi could call me Sith." I'll talk about that in a moment. That's around the time that Osha and Yord return. Yord returning back to the fight doesn't last very long because he is offed by the Master. So now, the only remaining Jedi is Sol, and he is the only person that heard anything about Sith. Well, besides Mae, but Mae knows a lot of the things already. But to wrap up this whole fight, Osha takes the light from Pip and puts it on the Master's back. The big flying insects come in and take the Master away. Now, after all of that, there's eventually a confrontation between Osha and Mae, the first time they're actually talking together as adults. Mae says that Osha's been brainwashed by the Jedi, while Osha is convinced that Mae needs to be taken to the authorities. That whole confrontation ends with Mae knocking Osha unconscious. Mae takes Osha's outfit, so now Mae, dressed as Osha, and Sol are now headed back to the ship, and Sol just doesn't know which way is up. The Master, who eventually escapes the insects, finds Osha. But it looks like he's taking care of Osha, and he's looking for an Acolyte. So, could Osha end up being the new Acolyte? Because Mae already betrayed the Master. Finally, you have Mae and Sol back on the ship, but also the tracker Basil returns. And you can see Basil doing a lot of sniffing, and of course he's found part of Pip, but he also knows the scent of Mae versus Osha. So basically, to sum things up, almost everyone dies except for the Master, Sol, the two twins, Osha and Mae, and Basil. Those are the only ones that survived. My feelings on this episode are mixed, and the reason is I felt like the action was good. A lot of things happened that I thought, like if we have the revelation of the Master and maybe Sith, that most of them won't be able to survive. And of course, that is what happened. Most of them did not survive, so they would not be able to tell the story to the rest of the Jedi. I felt Sol's emotional moments in this episode were exactly what they needed to be for where he is. Very conflicted. There is that element of the past. You see the anger rising when confronting the master. All of those were shown in his character. The parts I weren't really convinced about were really with Osha and Mae. I feel like there is so much that hasn't been told with their stories that it doesn't quite feel natural yet. I feel like their motivations aren't there, so when they're confronting each other, it doesn't feel quite right. It's like we're supposed to have this emotional moment that isn't there yet until we have the backstory, at least. The revelation of who the master was, that one was pretty obvious. I think most people guessed in episode 2 who that was going to be. So that part wasn't really a mystery, but I don't necessarily think they were trying to hide that. One of the hardest things about this episode is Jeckie, I would say. Yord, I know we've been very mixed on as far as us liking him. It was very sad that he is no longer. But Jeckie was probably one of the best characters of the show, and now no more Jeckie. This episode was primarily action. There were a lot of reveals and things that happened within that, so there were some character moments, but it mostly was revolved around action, so it's hard to assess as far as the storytelling aspect of it. But I will say the action was very good. The character moments were very mixed. One of the complaints of the show that I've been seeing a lot is the aspect of uneven pacing when it comes to a lot of the storytelling or when it comes to certain people's story development. And I still feel that way with a lot of the show, and I still felt that way in this episode. But I feel like now that we're getting into the thick of it, things are improving because now we're very focused. It feels like a lot of pieces are missing in this show right now when it comes to story and character, because a lot of pieces are missing because we don't have the full backstory. Let's talk about Sith for a moment, because I am not fully convinced that this character is Sith, that Kamiris is Sith. He says that Jedi could call him Sith, but he didn't call himself a Sith. And generally, Sith are very proud about being Sith and don't generally announce themselves. Now, it could very well end up being that this person is a Sith looking for an Acolyte. It could be very much that, but I'm not convinced yet. But so far, so much of this show has been on the surface that it could well be that. So again, this show has been very mixed for me. Some episodes below average, some are okay. I think things are starting to improve, but it still doesn't feel quite natural for flow. There's been a lot of talk on whether things break canon or not, especially when it comes to revealing the Sith. Now, so far, the only person that knows that there's a Sith is Sol, and we don't know what Sol's outcome is going to be by the end of the show. I'm pretty sure if I shook a magic 8-ball, outlook would not look good, especially since the person who is now with him has been wanting to kill him. This show is still very mixed for me. I felt that this episode was pretty decent, and especially because it was revolved around a lot of action, I felt like a lot of the character moments suffered a bit because, again, that doesn't necessarily feel natural yet. I don't know what they're going to do with the rest of the show. We have 3 episodes left and a very limited cast now. But now that we're 5 episodes in, so we're a little over halfway, for me, this show is still just okay. If there are some amazing moments or amazing reveals later on, I might change my mind. But so far, this show has been fairly consistent on that for me. And we will see you next week for the Acolyte, episode 6. May the Force be with you.